Okay. All right. I'd like to thank you all for coming. My name is Joshua Tucker. I'm the director of the Jordan Center. And today it is a great pleasure to welcome those of you who are here in person, those of you who are here on Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us. And we are really, really excited to be able to host Christina Peterson, who's a postdoctoral researcher at the Copenhagen Business School. And she is also a postdoctoral research fellow at NYU Center for Social Media and Politics. She's going to be presenting a paper in progress today that we are eager to get comments and feedback on. And I will say that everything that is great about this paper is due to Christina's work. And any complaints or worries that you have about it are entirely due to her co-author on this paper. So please join me in welcoming Christina here. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so just a additional quick introduction for the ones of you in this room who don't know me and on Zoom. So the majority of my research is on authoritarian regimes and information control in authoritarian regimes, and kind of primarily looking at Russia as a case empirically, and also looking at a lot of online activity, kind of social media stuff. Today, I will be talking about kind of responses to repression. So a lot of you might be familiar with these headlines about different authoritarian regimes kind of employing different crackdown measures on protesters, activists, citizens, both concerning kind of censorship and blocking off of information, as well as threatening people with jail time for political expression. And the research is kind of split on what the implications of kind of direct and overt repression measures are. So on one hand, there are plenty of papers showing that once regimes kind of either block social media or threaten punishments for saying something, people do respond by kind of self-censoring or reducing their interactions with certain platforms. On the other hand, we also see a bunch of research kind of pointing towards the opposite, so kind of this backlash effect. So people mobilizing both online and offline to kind of protest regime repression due to kind of anger and provocation. In our case, we're looking at something called the foreign agent law in Russia as our case, to kind of look at how very overt and targeted repression measures impact those who are targeted by these measures, so kind of those who are targets of this, direct targets of this repression, as well as their audiences, so people who experience it indirectly. And we analyzed about 200,000 videos posted by these Russian political actors who are labeled as foreign agents on YouTube, as well as over 100 million comments adjacent to those videos. So looking both at those labeled as well as their audiences. So a quick ethical disclaimer. So while I might sometimes refer to the targeted actors as foreign agents, obviously this is not a label that neither me or Josh stand behind or want to legitimize. It's also important to say that obviously all of the results in this paper will be aggregated and anonymous. And we also kind of seek to consult with people on the foreign agent list before we proceed with publishing this paper. Okay, so on the kind of a little bit of background on what the foreign agent law is. It was first introduced in 2012 in Russia, and initially primarily targeting NGOs. And the idea was that this was organizations that were founded somewhat by the funded monetarily by the West. And this kind of expanded over the years also as repressions grew to kind of broadly include anybody receiving any type of support from the West according to the regime, and came to include kind of anybody from influencers to political activists, journalists, etc. And so the kind of main observed consequences of this foreign agent targeting has been, and especially in the studies that have been made on the subject that are kind of primarily qualitative, has been the kind of administrative and somewhat financial burdens that these people experience. And so filling out a lot of paperwork, kind of getting fined for not complying with the law fully. And then again, over the past few years of increased repressions, a lot of it also has come to include people struggling finding jobs and also being kind of banned from teaching, lecturing, and kind of overall speaking publicly. So it is quite comprehensive in the way that it kind of impacts or supposedly impact people's lives. It is also worth noting that amongst kind of opposition circles or people sympathetic to the opposition, this could also be kind of perceived as a positive label because of kind of state independent media and people. Additionally, since 2017, for people who are in the foreign agent registry also have to kind of label any public content, so any online content, with like a disclaimer that they're foreign agents. So this is an example of this on YouTube videos, but this also concerns Facebook, whatever, any other media. By law, they're required to put a disclaimer, so kind of everybody engaging with their content should know that they are by the state designated as foreign agents. And so what do we do in this paper? We're interested in kind of a twofold dynamic. Hello. So on one hand, we're interested in the impact of this foreign agent labeling on political actors, so those who are targeted and put on the registry. And secondly, we're interested in their audiences. So the people who engage with these political actors, how do they potentially respond to seeing this repression enacted? And we have these two theories, kind of silencing and backlash that I mentioned to you before. So on the one hand, the political actors who are directly targeted, are they deterred from kind of continuously engaging in political life after this due to the kind of increased consequences, the punishment that they are facing? Or are they kind of motivated to fight back and become and push back towards the regime, become more vocal? And similarly, this also kind of counts for their audiences. So by indirectly observing somebody being targeted as a foreign agent, do you become more likely to self-censor out of fear or kind of push back? And the fear aspect of it especially comes from the fact that you're kind of witnessing the regime's repressive capacity through witnessing this repressive targeting of actors. And we also kind of expect that audiences react to this targeting and foreign agent labeling through two primary channels that we don't currently test, but are working on testing. So one is kind of learning about the fact that somebody is a foreign agent, either through the news or through the labels that I just showed you. So earlier kind of Levada surveys, which is a Russian survey organization, show that people have had little knowledge about who is or is not on the foreign agent list. So especially prior to kind of increasing repression after the full-scale invasion in 2022, we would expect that people, if they learn about it, probably learn about it through seeing it in the videos. Or alternatively, if becoming a foreign agent changes somebody's online presence, for instance, make them talk more about politics in their content, we would also expect that this could also alter kind of audience reactions. Okay, so this leads us to our many hypotheses. So we're testing three kind of main things. So one, we're interested in seeing kind of online presence. And I should also mention before I proceed, so something that is the reason that this is especially interesting using kind of YouTube and looking at online presence here is that YouTube is not a Russian company, obviously. So the idea is also if we see any changes, especially in audience behavior on this platform that is kind of outside of the direct control of the regime's grip kind of stretches pretty far. So yes, we look at online presence. So are targeted agents more or less likely to post videos online? And are their audiences more or less likely to engage with them? And we also look at kind of broadly political expression. So are the targeted actors prone to produce more or less political content in their videos. And the same counts for the audiences engaging with them. So do people comment less or more political content? And similarly, we also include whether this content, as well as the comments, become more or less regime critical. And lastly, we also include a quirky little fourth hypothesis. So the idea being people might start self-censoring if they're scared, but we kind of anecdotally observe sometimes people expressing political, especially younger people expressing political opinions kind of more discreetly. So think of the Winnie the Pooh meme of Xi Jinping a few years ago. Think of all the emojis people use on TikTok for all the TikTok people in the room when they don't want to get shadow banned. So this is the idea here. So we want to see whether audiences specifically, whether they increase or decrease their engagement or political speech, do they also increase the use of kind of symbols in their comments? Okay, and so how do we do this? Yeah, so we kind of operate with the fact that people are targeted and put on the list at different times. And the kind of tricky situation we have here is that in a perfect world, we would be comparing people who do get on the list with people who are very, very similar but don't get on the foreign agent list. The problem is if you don't get on the foreign agent registry at some point, you're probably pretty different from the people who do get. So instead, we're kind of exploiting the variation in timing of being designated and using, and I promise not to be way too technical, but use a thing called a staggered difference in difference design to kind of compare the treated people, so those who are on the foreign agent list, with the people who are not yet treated as foreign agents, but who will become later. And to kind of illustrate this, I have this very advanced drawing. So just to kind of explain the logic, we have channel 1 and it's treated at time 2. And there's also channel 2 and 3 and they're treated later. So when we're looking at the effects of being labeled a foreign agent on channel 1, we're comparing it to channel 2 and 3 that are treated later. So this is kind of the simple setup. And kind of also to give you an intuition for the difference in difference idea, what we're doing is we're looking at the differences before and after being treated, and we're also looking at the differences between the treated channel and the untreated channel, so the not yet treated channel. Okay. So how did we do this? Kind of what is the data here? So we, using the list of designated foreign agents as it was in July of 2023, yes, it has taken an annoyingly long time to finish this paper. What we did was we had a very nice research assistant that went through each and individual person on the list of about 600 and looked for people with a YouTube presence. For each of these channels, YouTube channels of the people, we went through and using the YouTube API, collected their kind of channel metadata. So when was the channel created? What videos does this channel have? Each of the videos, publishing date of the video, title, etc., as well as all the comments connected to each of those videos. And additionally, we also made sure to get video captions. So this kind of leaves us with a data set where we, for about 128 different kind of people or organizations on the list who have a YouTube presence. And again, we end up with this number because some people don't have enough data all the way through, or maybe might have too small of an audience to kind of be able to measure this. And we end up with a data set where we get 203,000 videos across these kind of treated individuals, as well as about 115 million Russian language comments. And this is something we do in the main analysis. This is kind of an imperfect proxy because what we're interested in is the audiences that are most impacted or potentially would be most impacted by this repression. And those would be people who are kind of within the country. And we can't see who the people leaving the comments are, but we can kind of see which comments are Russian language. So what we do is kind of subset those and take that as a proxy for kind of the people within Russia, even though many more people might be commenting in Russian. And yeah, so we end up with list entries between 2014 and around mid-2023. So this is kind of a broad time span, and use the data on a weekly and kind of monthly aggregation. Wow, this is the first time I'm extra good on time. Okay, so to kind of get into the results, so what I will do is I will tell you how we measure something specifically, and then I'll show you the result. So you'll not have to wait too long. So kind of to start off with the online presence, so kind of the online presence of the targeted actors and the online presence of their audiences. For targeted actors, we're simply looking at the kind of weekly number of videos they're posting, and we're logging it. And then we're seeing whether the amount of videos posted changes before or after for targeted actors compared with those who are not yet on this foreign agent list. For users, we're looking at kind of the proportion of comments to videos within a month. And the reason it's a month is just to kind of reduce the noise. People might be finding out more slowly about somebody being designated. And we're looking at the proportion of comments to videos as the kind of person they're engaging with becomes a foreign agent. And also kind of just to mention this, obviously in a perfect world, we would also be able to see whether viewership and subscription counts change. However, for the data we're able to get, we can only see kind of the comments people leave, and those are timestamped. This is why we're able to do this kind of temporal design here. Okay, so do the targeted actors actually change their online presence? So here you see an event study plot. So what you're seeing is period level effects. So the kind of individual week 1, week 2 after treatment effect sizes. And what we see is a very flat pattern. So the way that we interpret this is kind of people get treated, so people get designated as foreign agents, but there's no evidence that they change their posting habits. So kind of somewhat normatively positive news, people do not reduce their online presence, but they don't increase it either necessarily. Okay, what about their audiences? Here we see a slightly different pattern. So the two plots I'm showing you now is kind of the log ratio of comments to videos. So those comments that have been posted within a month, taking into account how many videos were posted within that month too. And here you're seeing a similar thing, but taking into account that a certain channel can have like a huge video library. So people will sometimes still continue posting comments on slightly older videos. And kind of the overall pattern we're seeing here is that there's a clear decline in the relative number of comments on average number of comments on targeted channels. So people who engage with targeted foreign agent content reduce their engagement with this content as relative to non-treated or non-foreign agent channels as they kind of get on the list. And those in the effect sizes we have here are fairly large as well. So you're seeing kind of the aggregated effect sizes for a 12-month period and a 6-month period. And here it is kind of ranging in between 14-20% and a kind of 30 to 47% decline. So what we've kind of looked into is where does this decline maybe happen the most? And it seems that this is especially driven by the post-2022 period, without kind of being able to specifically point at one specific time from then. But this kind of intuitively makes sense to us because the full-scale invasion begins and repressions intensify pretty strongly. So not only are people kind of primed with the regime's repressive capacity outside of the kind of foreign agent space or outside of like consuming this political content, this is also a time where a lot of people become labeled as foreign agents. Okay. What about political and regime critical content? This looks slightly overly complicated, but basically, so we fine-tuned the model. So basically, we used an LLM and we helped it along a little bit by giving it a little bit more data that kind of suited our case. And what we were interested in here was classifying whether either a comment or an excerpt from a video could be classified as political within a Russian context, as well as whether this comment or video excerpt could be classified as regime critical within the Russian content. And regime critical could be pro-opposition or criticizing the authorities. This can be kind of a broader umbrella. And looking at, and looking at kind of both actors and the audiences, we kind of look at the proportion of videos that are political to begin with and the proportion of videos that are regime critical. I made a mistake here. It's weekly, not monthly for actors. But we also, besides from looking at kind of the share of videos every week that is political or regime critical, we also look at within each video on average, because we have all these excerpts from each video that can be between 5 minutes and an hour long, how much of a video on average is political or regime critical.
Christina,
yes.
We have a question on Zoom. We look at it.
Yeah.
That right now?
Sure.
You got it. All right, so Sasha's got on you. Antonio, if you want to ask your question.
There should be a pop-up window on your screen. We can't hear you if you're speaking. Oh. Maybe, can you write your question in the chat?
I think he just disappeared.
Oh.
Very mysterious.
All right, bad timing. Okay.
Okay.
No worries. I'm here if any questions arise again. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, do feel free to like ask questions during or after. Okay, so yeah, so we are looking at the proportion of videos that are political regime critical. We're also looking at the videos themselves. For users or audiences, it's kind of more straightforward. We're just looking at the proportion of comments within a given month in a video that are political or regime critical. Okay, so starting with political and political content of videos. There's not that much to see. So while there could be some initial indication of some positive effects within the first couple of weeks, both on kind of the proportion of videos and the average proportion of a video that is political, this is basically null effects. So there's not much here. So kind of in a general interpretation, we don't see any evidence that makes us conclude that targeted actors kind of produce more political content or less for that matter. Then looking at regime criticism, there's a slightly different picture. So there's a slight, but statistically insignificant increase in regime critical videos or the proportion of them after treatment for targeted actors. But kind of slightly more clearly, we see a statistically significant increase in the kind of average proportion of a video that becomes regime critical. And this is amounting to a 4 percentage point increase. So it's small, but it's statistically significant. This is not the most robust result. So we do in other specifications see a similar positive effect, but that it does not remain significant in other models. So this might be important to say, Josie.
I didn't get what was the difference between this one and the one before.
So
This one is
yes.
for content, and the one before was
So this one is political content,
okay.
and this one is regime critical. Yeah. So political content can be anything talking about politics, and the regime critical is kind of more. Yes.
How do you differentiate if a video is regime critical versus the amount of the video that's regime critical? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. So in these plots, a video is regime critical of at least one kind of transcript chunk from that video. So we kind of split all videos into equal chunks of text, transcriptions, and then we classify those transcriptions. And this is a slightly kind of conservative measure because we're looking at whether any chunks within the video are regime critical. And what we see, and I don't have this to show you, but what we see is if we become kind of more, if we increase this threshold and say a video has to include at least like 30-40% of regime critical content, this becomes more positive and statistically significant too. So that might also be worth while adding. And well, this is kind of showing us the proportion of a video on average that is regime critical. Okay. There. Yes, okay. Then looking at the proportion of political comments and regime critical comments, we again kind of don't see any strong patterns. So there is some kind of patterns of declining proportions of political content over time, so kind of long term. And kind of if you squint, some indications of a decline amongst regime critical comments, but we don't see any kind of statistically significant results here. And also, and these also don't really hold across statistical specifications. So the way that you can kind of interpret what I'm saying here is that here we don't kind of find any evidence for people to kind of reduce their to self-censor or necessarily kind of respond with backlash. Yeah.
So super interesting. It seems like for your user-based hypotheses, you're looking at a week-to-week difference in their behavior, and with people who comment, it's a month-to-month. Can you talk more about your motivation between those two different times?
The motivation was that we kind of thought that, so if you're targeted and you're designated as a foreign agent, you're kind of have an immediate treatment. And then like whatever you post that week, I would assume that you're kind of already being impacted by it. But with comments, there's so much noise and kind of the assumption that people might not know right away and it might take some time. And especially a lot of it was also noise when like modeling it on a weekly level.
Okay.
So this is the reason we kind of let this one be monthly. And the model also runs quicker when it's monthly, but that's not the main reason. Okay. Okay, so last kind of result of the paper. So the symbols I've mentioned. So what we do is kind of use a existing algorithm, a Python module, to extract or identify the presence of emojis which have like specific codes or specific kind of symbol codes that you can identify when you go through text. So we identify all comments with emojis, and we're looking at all kind of Russian language comments, including emojis, or comments that are only emojis. So this is kind of the group of comments we're looking at here. And we're looking at the share of the comments that use emojis. And here we have a kind of slight, discrete, small, but statistically significant effect. So what this event study plot kind of indicates to us is while this increases over time, there is seemingly a slight increase in the use of symbols amongst audiences as people or as the content creators they're kind of consuming content from become designated foreign agents. This amounts to a 1 percentage point to 2 percentage point increase between 6 months and 12 months. So again, this is subtle. And again, it seems like it really picks up after the first 6 months. In a perfect world, we would kind of look more detailed into the type of emojis that are being put and kind of be able to see, okay, well, are there specifically which political emojis are being used? The problem is political language changes over time, especially between 2014 and 2023. So it would be slightly hard to track. So this is kind of the best proxy that we have here. Okay. Well, okay, really good on time. So kind of to conclude, looking at the effects or like the implications of repression on targeted actors and kind of their online presence. Do they disappear from online? Do they reduce their presence? We don't see this to be the case, which could be kind of good news. That this kind of regime repression does not stifle the presence of these political actors. We don't see any changes in the proportion of political videos amongst these actors, but we do see some evidence of kind of an increasing of regime criticism within their videos, which kind of points us towards this kind of backlash idea amongst the people who are targeted. On the other hand, amongst their audiences, we see kind of an opposite thing, at the very least when it comes to online engagement. So we see that people who engage with kind of this pariah branded content start, as we would interpret it, self-censoring. So reduce the amount of comments they're kind of, or reduce their engagement with this content. However, we don't see any kind of firm evidence on changes in language. So people might kind of drop off and stop engaging with this content, but they don't change the way in which they speak, the people who do stay and comment. Although we do see that the people who do stay kind of suggestively do increase their use of kind of symbols / emojis. And I think an interesting interpretation to add to this is like, why is there this difference in reactions? And there's multiple reasons we would expect for targeted actors to either kind of respond with backlash or self-censorship. And one of the reasons that we think targeted actors are not necessarily deterred from after being put on this foreign agent list is that you're also most often, this will not be your first kind of run-in and experience with repression. These people are kind of already engaging with politics, and they're probably also already experiencing some level of persecution from the regime. Some of these people might also already be outside of Russia, not to mean that they don't have anything to be scared of. But at the very least, they don't have this domestic, they're still in the country threat of arrest, for instance. However, what we kind of theorize is that audiences might be suddenly kind of faced with the regime's repression capacity, and especially kind of post 2022 and the increased repression, that this kind of first interaction with what the regime is able to do, and potentially also, especially if targeted actors are kind of increasing their regime criticism, and you're kind of more primed with the kind of atrocity that the regime is engaging in, that people become scared and become aware of what the regime is kind of willing to do. So yeah, in that sense, we kind of see some evidence for backlash among targeted actors, and then at the same time, a reduction or kind of a self-censorship for this indirect exposure to repression amongst their audiences. And this is especially interesting, again, because YouTube is not a Russian social media. So kind of this idea, if people stop engaging in even on a foreign platform, what does this mean for, the rest? Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, we can take questions from the audience, but also questions from anybody who's on Zoom. So just use the hand raising feature on Zoom if you want to ask a question.
Am I supposed to? Oh, okay. Laura.
I was just wondering, concerning the emojis and symbols, if you have any like examples of a regime critical emoji.
I do.
Is it just like do you count like all emojis?
We
Or
do, unfortunately.
specific. Okay.
Yeah, and it's because they change over time. And I should have brought examples, but I'll tell you about them instead. So for instance, once people started going to the streets, like especially post the invasion, a lot of the like walking emojis got popularized as like a sign to like, let's go to the protest. One that we include in the manuscript of the paper is this comment where somebody's talking about the regime party, United Russia, being trashy. And then they have like the bear that symbolizes the party kind of universally, and then a trash next to it. So those would be kind of ideally the examples. But obviously, again, here it's all of them. So it also does include people just leaving like laughing emojis all the way through. Yeah. Or sorry, yeah, if you still have it.
Yeah. In your hypothesis one for your measurement of your user engagement, were you only looking at comment numbers and types, or was it also viewership?
And not viewership, unfortunately. So that's not possible to get kind of as an outsider through the YouTube API. That would kind of entail that we had to get somebody to donate their YouTube, like some of the people on the list to donate their data.
Okay, so you can't really tell if people are not watching altogether or if they're just not.
Yeah, and we've gotten some feedback that there was actually some like increased kind of not engagement, but increased viewership. Which makes sense, kind of, especially after 2022, where people are outraged, they're looking for information. And so like some of the more raw thoughts that I'm having is like there might actually be an increased consumption of this content, but that the kind of engagement with this content falls because people get scared, but they're still consuming it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Anecdotally, did you hear anything about people going to other platforms to talk about the videos that were on YouTube, like going to a Telegram channel?
Oh, to recommend them?
Or like to discuss what was said in the videos, but not on the YouTube platform?
No, but that sounds pretty cool. I think also initially when we're starting this project, and who knows, I mean, there's still always time. The idea was also that, oh, maybe potentially in the future we could extend it to other social media platforms. Also because without this necessarily being only a social media kind of paper, it would be interesting to see if there's like differing effects among, but no, that would be pretty cool.
Okay.
Do you have a hand? No.
But you can go ahead.
Okay. So one thing that you're thinking about is audience and audience, how they comment. Did you get some sense for how, if there was, you don't actually know viewership, but you know comments, if the audience changes, do you see an influx of different commenters? And if
Yeah.
if you only look at the same commenters across time, how do your results change?
Thank you for this question. Yeah, so we did an audience analysis. Yes, we did an audience analysis, and the thing is, interestingly, not included in the plots here, there is no changes in the kind of audience composition. So we tried to look at whether the proportion of new users and the proportion of recurring users changed, and that is like more or less exactly the same. We also tried to look at whether the proportion of Russian-speaking comments changes, and there is a slight decline in them, but it's very minuscule. We also do see, so when we measure the comment engagement only on people who had commented prior to treatment, so kind of users who were already likely to engage, the drop is even higher. So kind of the people who engage with this content before everything happens, before people get designated, the reduction kind of then stays very consistently on those like 40 to 50%. I'm so bad at controlling this. I don't know what's supposed to do. Thank you, John.
I have a question. It's not like a fully formed question, so apologies for that. But I'm just curious to hear you maybe talk a little bit about how the factor of exile and people's geographic location played into the research, like whether you thought about the impact of exile on people's behavior and how, like, what role that might play in in your findings.
Yeah, we discussed this a bunch. So we really wanted to be able to know when people leave and where they leave.
Yeah.
Because like, especially after the full-scale evasions, a lot of people just left.
Yeah.
And that's a big issue not to know about, because like just intuitively, it might matter a lot how you react to an additional level of repression, whether you're inside the country or whether you're far away. So the thing is, we might know how many in our sample are not in Russia. So for instance, YouTube has this like geo-labeling on some of the channels where it says whether it's a Russian or a non-Russian channel. We can also kind of Google our way through and see whether people moved out of the country, etc. The problem is that while we can know how many people in our sample are in and out of the country, we do not know when this exactly happened. And if we want to, and it's pretty important for us to know whether it happened before or after treatment. And like how long after the treatment it happened, and that we cannot really know. So I think we don't include it in the modeling, but there's, I think the interpretation kind of, we just have to take that into account, and especially like, let's say that we like believe these results and they're like, okay, there's no changes in posting behavior, and overall people increased regime criticism. It might be driven by the fact that a lot of the people in the sample are outside of the country, and like that's pretty important.
Have you considered just reaching out to the people in your data set? I mean, how many people are, I think they would talk to you.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
they probably would tell you when they left. Maybe they wouldn't give you the exact date, but I think
I mean, maybe we should. I mean, I'm especially interested to reaching out. I mean, besides from like talking, I would be especially interested to like getting the YouTube data donations, so we could like. Yeah. So this is definitely, I mean, this is both something we talked about, and I'm not opposed to it. Yeah, we can talk about it more too. Yeah.
All right, we have a question on Zoom from Olga Niersen. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. That says, can you expand on the type of risks foreign agents face even when outside of Russia? So building off of this question. After all, the label seems to imply some compliance for them to self-label most commonly. They are still in danger. They fear reciprocation for family and friends who are still in Russia. This de facto turns both the foreign agents and their families into Russia's regime hostages. For example, does your statistic consider the factor of who of those posting, in fact, does have family and close friends still in
Yeah.
Russia? So this is more on this idea of
Yeah.
getting more information about them.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the question kind of answers itself, or like that's exactly the point, right? So that like we see, so people are like by law, they have to label their content as foreign agents. Not everybody does this. And we also see that like sometimes in the sample, when we've like coded it manually, that it changes whether people do or not. But people do get pretty hefty fines for not doing it, and the kind of potential for punishment accumulates over time the more fines they get. And I mean, only I think last month the regime increased the punishment for not complying with the law, which I think they like opened up for now. You no longer just get a fine; you potentially get a criminal case on you right away. So there is kind of a monetary component to it, and the thing is that yeah, as was mentioned, even if you're not inside the country, you might have family inside the country, or you might have like real estate inside the country, anything else. So like you get fined, you get your kind of possessions taken away, or your family gets threatened. So there's still reason to think. And I think that's kind of, at the very least, adds some nuance to the results, that there's reason to think you would be motivated to potentially change your behavior, maybe not, even if you're outside the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, in your analysis of the comments, did you find anyone talking about the foreign agent label?
Yeah, see, this is on my to-do list. So we did like quick word searches. But what I want to do is an additional robustness check into the appendix, seeing whether, especially because I personally find it a little bit interesting and strange that people reduce engagement, but don't change political expression, like don't reduce that or regime criticism. So one of the next steps is like doing a proper, maybe like a embedding type situation where we're able to catch any mentions of the foreign agent label, and seeing if there's like a change there, and maybe also kind of compare it to changes and whether the content creators themselves are talking about it, as well as the like label analysis. We still have work to do, yeah.
In the chat for a little bit. Yes, from Lee Yvonne. Do we unmute them?
Yep.
Yes, thank you very much. I had two questions. First of all, to kind of expand on Olga's question, could you elaborate if people labeled their videos with this video was produced by a foreign agent, was this at all taken into analysis? And second question is, could you also elaborate on the choosing the comments with only the Russian language? I believe that there's a certain trend of bilinguality and English being used as a more oppositional language, and I believe that this could be effective in terms of signals and signaling your political positioning. I wonder if that was taken into effect. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for this question. So on accounts of the labels, we are currently working in an analysis where we are incorporating the labels and specifically looking at the labels as a treatment in themselves, besides from becoming a foreign agent. And the reason that this is slightly more complicated is that a lot of the labels and what they have to be is visual on the video. So what we have so far is we've gone through, for each of the people in our sample, gone through the first 5 to 10 videos they posted after being designated and kind of manually coded if they included the label. There is also some potential to kind of expand this and use some like deep learning models and some imaging models to kind of try and model it into the whole entire sample, which would be great. Our initial, and this is extremely preliminary and kind of, I'm trying to be careful saying this, what we kind of are seeing preliminarily is that there is a stronger and bigger effect, at least on comment engagement. So people reduce their engagement even more when a label is present. But again, this is a little bit too early to say. And then there's the Russian language comments. I fully agree. I think the kind of conundrum is that it's hard to find a balance between finding the perfect proxy. So if our kind of audience of interest is people who will most likely be inside the country, and we can't know that, it just seems slightly more likely that somebody commenting in the Russian language would be inside the country, even though it could be many other countries as well, and it doesn't have to be a Russian person. This is why we also did the analysis looking at whether Russian language comments increased or decreased after the treatment. But something that could be a possibility would be to run the classifier of political and regime critical content on English language comments and seeing that maybe there's something there too. That would actually be pretty neat. Yeah, thanks.
Are you interested in the different, oh, sorry.
No,
Did I skip something?
good.
Are you interested in the different reasons why a blogger might not be responding to the foreign agent law? Like, I'm just thinking about how, like in 2014, for example, people who were labeled with foreign agent law, they did, they paid the fines, they did the audits, and then they just went on with their day. I mean, that's based on my own like research on the
Yeah.
NGOs. I don't know about bloggers, but that's sort of, it was 2014 was a different time. It's hard to say that it was really repressive still, but it was a different time. Whereas now, most people are being labeled foreign agents, as you said yourself, and as we already discussed, like most of them are gone, they're in another country. So there are different motivations behind not responding to repression when you're located somewhere else versus when you're in Russia, you're planning to stay in Russia. It's 2014 and your plans are different. So I'm just sorry for rambling, but I'm just curious if you're interested in the differences between I'm not super familiar with staggered differentness. So like the differences between the groups, and all the different reasons why someone might not respond to a foreign agent label. Like, are you thinking about that, and are you interested in it?
I am thinking about it. It would be interesting, especially because there's we would expect that there's clearly systematic differences between both over time, as you said, because there's different trends in who gets labeled when, but also on the type of channel, the type of who, is it a journalist, is it a activist, and and who does use the labels or not, whether they're in the country or not. It's a little bit tricky to, off the top of my head, to model it for the targeted people analysis, because it is a post-treatment variable in and of itself. But we can try and use it for the audience engagement analysis. And the thing is, so before we ran these preliminary things looking at whether comment engagement decreases even more per labels, it does seem like the audience engagement in general is systematically different for the channels that do comply at some point and don't. And the same, there's a similar thing concerning channel size, which again, it's hard to see temporarily, but still, yeah.
Jacob?
I'm curious if you thought about how you can rule out algorithmic effects, because there are two concurrent activities going on, particularly after 2022, where YouTube is both kind of trying to desperately not get banned in Russia, but also trying to desperately not look like an agent for the Russian state, and are kind of wildly changing how they treat videos in Russia. But then you also have the Russian state who's trying to decide if they're going to ban YouTube. We know they started interfering with YouTube streaming, and it doesn't seem at all unreasonable that might be targeted in ways that could just decrease engagement by decreasing viewership, particularly inside of Russia, where they're able to kind of interfere with the streaming. And so I'm wondering if you thought about ways that you're able to rule out just the foreign agent label changing who ends up seeing the video in their algorithm, either because of interference from either actor or both.
For sure. So we can't rule it out. And I think we also touch on it in the manuscript that there is a likelihood that something happens. It can maybe it can even happen because somebody gets labeled. Let's say they do change how they engage, so increase regime criticism, and for one reason or another, the algorithm kind of recommends them to different people or less people. Or people react to them being a foreign agent slightly in one way or another, algorithm reacts to that, recommends it differently. So there's different pathways that I at least don't have any ideas for kind of how to test. What we did do, which I think is kind of the best thing, or the thing that we could try to do, was at the very least try and model for the fact that like a channel that gets treated in say time 2 or like in 2017, the reaction that that channel and their audiences will have to this foreign agent labeling will be impacted by the treatments, the foreign agent labeling that is happening in 2016 and 2015. Which is for the kind of metric nerds is kind of like a spillover, and I don't know, but so what we did do was for each of the channels taking kind of the couple of months prior to them becoming treated, taking the latest cohort or the cohort that was treated right before them and calculating the audience overlaps like in the commenters and seeing how many commenters overlap between them and kind of controlling for that. So like trying to control for the fact that you might be similar to somebody else who's treated and they're like, and in that sense, whether that might impact you or whether there's like some algorithmic things that can be going on. But again, we can't kind of isolate it, unfortunately.
We have another question.
Oh, great. Okay.
Olga, I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Yes, I have a question that kind of goes beyond the purview of your presentation. And it is because I'm very much inspired by the analytical part of what your work. I was wondering if, I was very much inspired by this talk. That's why I decided to attend, because I feel very vested in what's happening since I have a lot of friends and colleagues who are pretty much engaged in internal opposition in Russia. And to me, your work would increase their visibility because right now they feel abandoned not only by support within their country because of the repressions, but also by any Western support, because it's so easy to label everybody as bad and not to pay any attention to internal opposition. So my question is, to what extent are you motivated in your analytical work by the cause of increasing that internal opposition's visibility? I understand that I'm going beyond your immediate goals, but I just, it is the question that ails me, has been ailing me ever since February 2022. Very much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for those comments and the question. I think I find it tricky to respond to just because of the kind of the nature of conducting research in this way. I mean, I think I would be lying if I said that I didn't have personal stakes in the matter or opinions towards it that are normative, and I try to take that into account and not let that kind of impact our analysis. But I think obviously, I wouldn't say that I wasn't motivated by any personal opinions in this, but I just feel a little bit too careful to kind of respond in a subjective manner.
Yeah, I'll say, this is Josh, I'll say something on this. I think that you raise a really excellent point, which is I think it's important that we not shy away from doing research involving populations that find themselves in difficult situations, precisely because of this question about people's voices still being heard, still being part of the development of knowledge. And this comes up, for example, about people running research in Ukraine, for example, right? Because on the one hand, there are arguments that like, okay, you shouldn't be doing research in Ukraine right now, especially if your research is experimental and you're exposing people to things like this. But then at the same time, when you do research on people, you are taking their experiences and adding it to the knowledge base. And I think we do need to be careful about, because these are very dicey questions, and I think they raise important ethical conundrums. But I really appreciate your question, asking this today and bringing this point up, because I do think there is it is part of a larger issue that sometimes I think we can lose sight of. And there's a million things at play, right? Because there's also the safety of people doing the research and sending graduate students to visit places that are in conflict areas and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things going on, but I appreciate the fact that you took the time to ask the question and to say this, because there, it's easy to shy away from researching people who are in difficult situations. And I think that there is value to not doing that if you're careful, if you think through it, if you think through the connotations of it. And I appreciate you sort of raising this point about this. And these are, there was a similar paper that we were inspired by that looked at what happened to Saudi, that was written by another alum from our lab and one of our faculty affiliates, but that looked at what happened to Saudi dissidents when they were put into jail and then when they got out of jail, and what happened with people who had followed them on social media. And I think, when regimes are trying to silence the voices of people, it's important that academics not necessarily just fall in line, also silencing them by excising them from our research agendas. That being said, it's very challenging to do this, and it's challenging, of course, and I think it's also, really, really important, about the maintaining objectivity as you're doing the research and these kinds of things. So anyway, so thank you for your question.
What Josh said also, yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the online audience? If anyone wants to raise their hand, who hasn't had a chance to ask a question yet? Do we have anyone else in here? Yeah, go ahead.
Were you surprised by your results? Like when you talked about that 1 to 2% number, that was really small to me. I mean, overall, the sort of null effect, I was surprised. So yeah.
Yeah, I was. I think we were pretty surprised that the posting frequencies didn't change. Yeah, that was a surprise. I think so we kind of really honed in the audience analysis and engagement not that long ago, and I was pretty surprised by the magnitude of that effect. And like double checked it 1,000 different times because it just seemed like a little bit too huge. But I guess, yeah, especially taking into account that it's happening after the repression increase, that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, on the flip side of that, I mean, I think, so some of the effects are small, but just the previous questions that we've been getting here about like the differences between 2014 and 2022, the differences between people who left Russia and who stayed in Russia, there's only, like in this kind of a case, I mean, it's not like we took a sample of foreign agents on YouTube. We took all of the foreign agents who were on YouTube and included them in the study, but there's a limited number of people. So there's only so many ways you can dice this.
Yeah.
And the staggered diff and diff approach is just saying we are going to treat essentially like the months after the designation, the months before. So in some ways, I think instead of the results as feeling like these are totally small, these are little small effects. I think one way to think of it is sort of like proof of concept of the direction of the effects, that if it survives all these kind of challenges to finding statistically significant results in this case, there's probably something underlying that's driving this. And in general, I think you want to pay attention to the substantive side of effects, but I think it's kind of, this was a challenging research design. And I think to be able to find statistically significant effects in it. So I think that, I don't know, so I'll leave it with that. Okay, there's more hands that are going up. Jacob, and then, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm struggling a little bit to think through the parallel trends assumption, and apologies in advance for how garbled this is going to come out. I think I'm too sleep deprived to actually like think through the mechanics. But you can't rule out spillover, right? That these channels all kind of exist in a similar ecosystem. They all watch each other, they all see what each other do, and they see when other people are getting labeled. And so in the mechanics of the parallel trends assumption, how are you thinking through what's happening to your effects if channels that are kind of somewhat similar see someone else get labeled and they decide to back off their frequency or start to self-censor in other ways, or if I don't know, maybe I have a harder time thinking through a backlash story, but maybe there is one.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you're thinking through those mechanics and making the parallel trends assumption in a known spillover environment.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, to be fair, it's also like even now being like fully awake, it's hard for me to figure, those models are annoying. So So the model for reference we're using is called Vincentiana. And the nicer thing about this model is in this setup, it has like less strict parallel trends assumptions, because I might be butchering this from memory, but what we're doing is like comparing the treated channels to some of the non-treated channels. And as long as those have parallel trends, it's fine. That's, like we're not violating any assumptions. That said, yeah, the spillover thing is a little bit complicated. I think the best, like for me, like, okay, the best thing we could do was trying to include that as like covariates, the like measure I told you about before. I'm open to any more ideas because we've also gotten that comment before. And I think my PhD defense committee report was like, what about the smooth violation? So yeah, for sure. I'm not sure what the like straightforward solution to this would be because it's hard to disentangle those, but I agree.
To what you guys were talking about before and the surprise of the like slight no effect, like something like this. I was thinking in the beginning you said this thing with it also being kind of a positive thing for some of them to be labeled for an agent. So maybe there could be like two things pulling in each side, making it
For sure.
right? Because it maybe I can imagine this idea of being labeled someone who is against what I am against, kind of, right?
Mhm.
It being not something you want to pull away from, but more something you want to lean into.
Yeah, for sure.
Might be it. Something chill.
Yeah. I mean, that's also a fair point in general, because there's also a reality in which people, and also like Josh said before, for the smaller effect sizes, like we're challenged by power because it's like 128 units, and like yeah, unfortunately, but yeah, that like there is a world in which some people react by like being like, yeah, and the regime sucks, and other people are like, oh wait, this could happen to me, and then they stop commenting, and then they like cancel each other out. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Dave.
So I guess the assumption is also that these 128 YouTube channels were like considerably political and regime critical before being labeled a foreign agent, and were labeled a foreign agent because they were political and regime critical. So you could also say that finding like you didn't like finding even like not finding a decrease is still positive.
I guess. Yeah. I like the line of thinking.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm thinking through the implications of the audience analysis you did, particularly that you didn't find a change in the composition of the audience. You didn't see a huge influx of new commenters, or a detraction. Because you know more about this domain than I do, but I would have anticipated that there would be audience shade or even potential like state interference in comments. And so I don't know whether that's
Like trolls, you think?
Trolls or and again, you know more the Russian context than I do, but like in the American context, when we're talking about Russian interference, we're almost always talking about the production of content online by the Russian state or affiliates. And so one could imagine that the Russian state or affiliates could do that on the comment sections of foreign agents, but you seem to have shown that that's likely not true because there's not a huge influx of new
But who
accounts,
knows,
but I
right?
don't know. Yeah.
Because again, when we're like classifying for political content, regime critical content, we might be missing some like flooding of like emojis or whatever, like spam.
Sure.
I mean, wasn't there somebody at CSMAP once that did like troll detection something? Maybe we can include that at some point.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of that.
Yeah.
I mean, but you wouldn't be able to get it. I doubt if you'd be able to get it for comments.
Okay.
It was at account level stuff on Twitter.
Ah, I see. Yeah. Okay, for sure.
Maybe.
But yeah.
I mean, maybe there's like proxies we can use. I don't know, like something with comments that are like copy pasted or.
Okay. Yeah. Just auxiliary. It's really
Maybe we can give it a try. I think I'm also like, oh, imagine if there's like some more exciting effects with the comments that we're just not getting. So I'm willing to try any additional stuff to check. Thanks.
of course. Really cool.
Any other questions? We've got online. Any questions? The last questions online? Okay, awesome. Well, then thank you all for coming out on this afternoon, and please join me in thanking Christina for an amazing presentation. And
Thanks.